Wichita Falls cannot continue to kick the can down the road.
People understand debt.
6 months after the WFISD celebrated the passage of a bond election for new high schools, it's back to the ballot box for another bond referendum to build sports and band facilities.
Without practice facilities to go along with the high schools, we would be busing students twice a day for in-class and then after school for practice somewhere else.
But like in November,
And we're piling on debt to our children and future generations.
not everyone believes the $13.585 million bond proposition is the right thing for Wichita Falls. Tonight, KFDX presents Get Schooled on the WFISD Bond, a deep dive on those for and against this bond package that could have great implications for generations to come.
Good evening and thanks so much for joining us. I'm Zach Verdilla. It may feel a little bit like deja vu for voters, but early voting is underway for another WFISD bond election. So how did we get here? It starts with the new high school is slated for completion in fall of 2024. Ground broke on these facilities just last week. The West High School will be located on the north side of US Highway 82 near FM 369. The East High School is off US Highway 287 in Windthorst Road, which is owned by Legacy Park. However, now the issue lies, will there be sports and band facilities built on these campuses? And that is what WFISD voters will decide in the new bond election. Now, members for the For Better Schools PAC are hoping to spread the support of this bond. They believe it's common sense to finish what voters started back in November when the two new high schools were approved.
The 2021 bond is here, and it will address what failed in November: recreational facilities. The just over $13.5 million bond will look to add to the brand new buildings already voted in by the people.
We want to take it a step up, and we want to see our community continue to produce young people that win in life.
8 lighted tennis courts with seating for 100, 2 synthetic grass fields for baseball and softball with bleachers for 150 each, 8 lanes of batting cages, 4 each, along with an 8-lane track and turf infield for field events. Enough seating for 750, press boxes, tickets, concessions, restrooms. It will have it all.
Whether it be band and drill team using those facilities, or of course our athletic teams. And when you win on the field and in your extracurricular activities, you're going to win in the classroom.
But if the bond fails on May 1st, WFISD officials say students from the new schools will be bussed around town to different locations for extracurricular activities.
Whether it's before school or after school, and it'll affect the students in different ways.
Also causing district expenses to go up.
It costs time for the students, and it'll cost the district money.
WFISD parent Melissa Ligren knows firsthand the struggles it would cause band members.
They move that equipment every day from the band hall to the field. So for them to practice at another facility, you're talking about a large process.
Without facilities, that process becomes even larger.
Larger instruments like the percussion, the marimbas, the bass drums, the sound equipment, the flags, all of that has to be transported with the students.
That's why Ligren and fellow supporter Marty McBride both agree the voters need to complete this project.
We're not building some big gargantuan stadium. We're not building big Cadillac facilities either. We're building good facilities that is needed, that teams that we compete against and other organizations that our bands and drill teams compete against have.
A project they say will benefit Wichita Falls for decades to come.
I played athletics. My children were in fine arts and athletics. I was in fine arts as well. My wife was in fine arts growing up. We had good teachers, good coaches. We had good facilities, but those facilities now need to be updated. It's just about creating a culture of excellence, and everybody wins when we have that in both of our high schools.
Even for those with die-hard Rojo blood like McBride, they'll accept the upcoming fandom changes hesitantly. but will eagerly accept the maximum 1.5-cent tax increase for what he believes will create a better future for the students of the new schools.
It's time to turn the page. It's time to put all that behind us, and it's time to create young people that win in life.
Looking to turn the page and close the book on school bond elections for a while.
Now, unlike when this proposal was on the November ballot, this time around the school district says it will take on $4 million out of its rainy day fund to help bring the athletic facilities up to competition level. If the bond passes, that will happen over 3 years. Now, still to come, WFISD Superintendent Mike Kurt will join us to answer your questions. But first, a full breakdown on what this school bond will mean for your taxes and why a passionate group of individuals are hoping voters say no at the ballot box. All this and more when Get Schooled WFISD Bond returns after this. Time now to answer the big question. If voters say yes to this new WFISD bond package, what will it cost you? So let's break it down. According to WFISD officials, this measure for sports and fine arts facilities comes with a 1.5-cent tax increase. Now that's combined with what voters already said yes to. The bond measure for new high schools that in November brought a tax hike of 30.5 cents per $100 of property value for taxpayers. That means the total tax impact sits at 32 cents per $100 on property valuation. Taking it further, both bonds together would bring a $320 hike annually for a home valued at $100,000. And many believe that increase is too high, and those that oppose the bond have a clear and simple message they want to get out there. It's okay to say no.
It's just more of the same. It's more debt. It's more taxes.
Vote No advocate Ed Stein has seen it all before.
No voters voted it down. And here we are 6 months later, and it's deja vu.
A small victory for the Vote No side in November was the failure of Prop B, an extra $13.585 million for sports and band facilities. That failed by a 1,381 vote margin, which is over 4 times as many votes clear than Prop A, the building of the 2 new high schools, which passed by just 322 votes. Now that the measure is back on the ballot for the May election, the fight for Stein and other no supporters continues.
Our biggest asset is our message. We have a selling message, and that is debt and taxes.
It's a message they know resonates with many in the community they've gone out and spoken with.
We've knocked on thousands of doors, talked to hundreds, if not thousands of people who are homeowners, even small businesses, and they understand this is more debt, and this is higher taxes.
For Stein, he believes continuing to raise the tax impact about an additional $11.25 annually on a $100,000 home will have negative impacts on everyone in Wichita Falls moving forward. That's considering Wichita County's tax rate on that same $100,000 home is 1.94%, with Smith County, anchored by Tyler, who no voters compare us to based on population, sits at 1.37%. According to calculations on the financial tech company Smart Assets website.
They struggle with their finances. They hold 2 jobs. They've got kids. They want to do things that are fun to do, but at the same time they've got to put food on the table. They've got to put clothes on their kids. They got to keep a roof over their heads.
And population growth is another glaring issue for Vote No advocates, with Wichita Falls not seeing much growth in the last 20 years, still with around 105,000 people. Compared again to Tyler, whose population is around 107,000, and has seen their population grow over 25,000 in that same time frame. Stein emphasizes no voters aren't against WFISD or new facilities, they're just concerned citizens.
You know, we all want good schools, and we all want good things for our city, but this $13.5 million bond is a good example of an expenditure that could have been done privately.
And that's a main counterpoint. Was there an attempt to raise this privately? Or is there someone currently in WFISD that could head up the project?
Take somebody on your staff and train them how to contact donors and how to ask for money, and I bet you could raise this thing privately. But instead, what you're doing is you're reaching into people's pocketbooks and wallets again for more money, and people are tired of it.
And if that's the case, and this bond fails for a second time, no voters hope WFISD gets the message Citizens of Wichita Falls are voting against debt and taxes.
It's an easy two concepts to sell and people to understand. Bonds are debt. It's okay to vote no.
Stein and his fellow vote no advocates will continue to object to more taxes and more debt and hope voters side with them once again.
And when it comes to taxes, a reminder for homeowners 65 and older, you can file for the appropriate homestead exemption that will make your taxes frozen. That is, unless you make big improvements to your home. Now, looking back the last 20 years, WFISD has held 5 total bond elections, with 3 passing at the ballot box, including the November election. One was back in 2015, where a $59.5 million school bond led to the construction of the Career Education Center, security enhancements, and a parking lot at Memorial Stadium. Of the 4 bond packages that have failed, the biggest was back in 2014. That's when voters overwhelmingly voted down a $125 million plan. It would have created 2 comprehensive high schools. The plan was to consolidate Ryder and Holt Old High into one larger school with a separate 9th grade facility. We have more on the tax rate increase and why the passage of this bond is so crucial to WFISD staff, and our interview with Superintendent Mike Kurt. Stay with us here on Get School WFISD Bond. We'll be right back. And welcome back. We'll continue our conversation about the WFISD 2021 bond. We're joined now by WFISD Superintendent Mike Kurt. Thank you so much for joining us. You're going to answer some questions that some viewers have today.
Correct. Yes, glad to be here.
All right. So let's go back to last November. Voters already turned down a bond for athletic and recreational facilities. So take us through the process of putting this measure back on the bond after voters already said no.
Okay. Well, I think there were several reasons, Zach, why that probably happened. One, it was the last item on a very long ballot. 2, that there were a lot of items on that ballot where it could be confusing. And 3, that the most important thing is the legislature several years ago changed it. And they said you cannot have anything not connected to the schoolhouse on the same proposition. And so therefore it had to be a separate proposition. But we all know that whenever you build a high school in the state of Texas, a comprehensive high school in the state of Texas, you have practice fields that go with them, not recreational facilities. We don't call them recreational facilities. When I think of recreational facilities, I think about a YMCA or I think about a park. And so I think whenever people saw recreational facilities, they were confused. So I think that was our thought process, and I don't think maybe we got the word out well enough for people to understand where we were coming from.
Of course. So, and in that same vein, we hear a lot of questions about why the school district maybe couldn't raise funds privately for these recreational and sports facilities. Why do you think that maybe wouldn't have worked?
Well, I think that's putting it a lot to chance. The longer we go in this process, the more expensive they become. Every year there's 2 to 3, 5, 6% inflation. It just depends. And so asking people privately to raise those funds is a big ask, I think, for this community. And raising funds this year when there's so many other needs in our community, I just don't think would be wise for us to do. These are part of our Common Core curriculum that we teach. In other words, we teach a core curriculum in schools that is required. In other words, we're required to have PE, we're required to offer fine arts and things like that, and these fields supplement those. In other words, band has somewhere to practice if they have a football field, a striped football field. PE has somewhere to go when they go outside and they're not in the gym. So these are required facilities as part of a comprehensive high school. So asking individual donors in our community, I think would probably be the wrong way to go.
So now looking at the tax impact, it's a concern for a lot of voters out there. What is your pitch to those who say maybe that their taxes are too high already?
I hear that, and I understand that. We know that in November, that was a really big ask for $276 million worth of a bond package, and then $13 million for these, in Proposition B, for these athletic facilities around our schools, and we get that. This is a 1.5 cent tax increase. And with the way things are and the values that we have right now, chances are when everything's said and done, it won't be 1.5 cents. But we have to advertise it that way. That's required ballot language. But with the values that we have right now and the values we saw from last year, it's probably not going to be that high. But right now, that's where we have to go with.
Of course. And so if this doesn't pass, what's kind of the solution for the district?
Well, that's really tough because students right now have athletics beginning of the day, students have athletics during the day, and PE during the day, and then they have athletics after school. And so it would totally change schedules for students, that we wouldn't have that opportunity. We would then be busing students from our new high schools to our other facilities in the district. Old High would be really our only facility that would be empty. Ryder would be a middle school with middle school athletics going on and competitions and everything in their gyms and outside on their facilities, their football fields, and other facilities. And then same thing with Hershey. And so it would be really difficult to come up with ways and schedules to transport kids during the day, missed instructional time, and then getting students back to their home campus to finish out their day in a lot of cases.
So, well, if you're looking towards May 1st and everything goes your way, what's kind of the next step in the planning process for these two high schools?
Well, right now we're in design development. We've just about wrapped that up on the two high schools, and so we've got the details worked out. Right now the architects are just going to go back to their offices and actually put all the specs in so that way we can bid this out. They will be bid out somewhere around October. And then we'll have a guaranteed maximum price for the entire projects. In other words, Prop A and Prop B, should Prop B pass. And then we would start construction in November. So this does put us a little bit behind on design, but our architect team is pretty awesome, and they'll catch up for us. And so it should not affect our timeline at all.
All right. Well, thank you to Superintendent Mike Kurt for joining us today and answering all of our questions for us. Stay with us. We'll be right back. In our final segment tonight, we're going to take a look at, if the bond passes, what's next for the school district. On deck, the closure of the historic high schools, new middle schools, and possibly more bond elections to come.
Now that ground is broken on the two high schools that will be the centerpiece of Wichita Falls, the WFISD has a lot on its plate in the coming years in hopes of bringing the school district into the 21st century.
Good job. These are going to be the most modern facilities we have in Wichita Falls and probably all of North Texas.
These new facilities are nameless for now. The school district has already begun the naming process with the WFISD School Naming Committee, comprised of 40 people who are students, staff members, parents, and community members. Then discussion of school names will begin in May. According to the timeline provided by the WFISD, the school board will receive a report with the top 5 names on June 21st. And the school board is slated to vote on a name in July.
Sure, there'll be a lot of local people nominated or local places or whatever it is, but we have actual policy that we follow in naming schools here in Wichita Falls. And so yeah, there'll be a lot of history involved, I'm sure, and history lessons for people in this process.
Once the new high schools are complete, the next phase for the long-range facility plan calls for Ryder and Hershey to be repurposed as middle schools. When that happens, the school district will retire Jefferson Elementary and Old High. The school district will do small move-in renovations to Hershey and Ryder. McNeil students will move to Ryder. Kirby students will move into Hershey. McNeil would be kept open, but shift to an elementary school.
And so Jefferson students and staff will move into McNeil along with overflow from West and Fowler, because that's where we're really crowded right now, just because all the growth that's happening on the southwest side of town.
This is all a part of the district's 30-year plan to touch every building in the district to either renovate it, add on to it, or retire it. Future bonds would be dependent upon the needs of the district at the time, but there are tentative plans in place for a bond in 2027 and 2035. The 2027 bond package includes major renovations to Hershey and Ryder because Superintendent Kurt said those facilities have to last about 30 more years in their new roles. Barwise would also get renovations. And the future bond would also feature additions and renovations at Crockett, Zunde, Burgess, Haynes, Scotland Park, Booker T. Washington, and Lamar, plus the retirement of some of the district's oldest buildings.
The long-range plan, the work that would happen in 2027 and 2035 would not include a cost increase to the taxpayers. That would be a zero-cost bond. We would still have to go to the voters and ask for their approval to maintain the 32-cent increase we're proposing in November. But the work that we've planned out over the next 30 years could be done with that same tax rate.
The potential 2035 bond would include additions and renovations on schools in the south side of town. The school board is also expected to consider options of selling retired buildings to be repurposed as apartments, moving administration offices, or keeping it for students to use temporarily while other construction projects are being done. Of course, all those plans could change depending on what the results are during the May 1st WFISD bond election.
By the way, you have until next Friday to submit your name nominations for both the new high schools. Meanwhile, early voting in the WFISD election continues tomorrow morning. You can vote at the WFISD Education Center in room 204 tomorrow from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. Voting is also taking place at Sykes Center Mall from 11 in the morning until 7 p.m. As a reminder, there is no early voting at home zone for this election. Early voting ends April 27th and Election Day is May 1st. We will have Election Day polling locations and everything you need to know about the WFISD 2021 bond election over on our website, Texomashomepage.com. As your local election headquarters, thank you so much for joining us. We here at KFDX will see you May 1st for full election coverage. Good night.